Welcome to Hope is Here. My name is Greg Horn, and a topic that has just caused devastation to many, many families in the United States, across the world, but especially here in the state of Kentucky, is addiction. And we're going to be talking with a young man today. I call him a young man. I think he's 45, but he's a friend of mine and a guy that I've known for about 5 years now. His name is Troy Hutchison, and Troy is actually a recovering addict. He's a follower of Jesus, and he's sober right now, but he's going to share his story. And for some of you, you know the pain and heartache of addiction, and you know this is going to bring up some pain, but for a lot of you, maybe you've been sheltered. You've heard about addiction, and yet I want you to be able to hear a voice of somebody that's really trying to stay sober and is a person of faith. And I think you're really going to be blessed over the next 3 or 4 days as we talk with Troy. So, Troy, first of all, man, just thanks for being vulnerable and honest. And as we prepared for this talk over the past couple of days, I know God's going to use it in a big way, but thanks, man, for just being willing to do this today.
Well, thanks for having me, Greg. I appreciate it, man.
All right. Well, I know your story, but I want our audience here locally in Central Kentucky and podcasts from people listening from Connecticut to California. Just tell a little bit about growing up, where you were born, and a little bit about growing up.
Okay. Well, I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. My father became a minister, and I believe he actually started at his first church when I was about 4, maybe 3 or 4 years old, in Barry, Kentucky, a little bitty church that you know well. He started there as a full-time minister, so I have vague memories of that. And the next really event that kind of shaped my life or played a big part of my life was my mother passed away. I was at the age of 5. My brother at the time was 3. So that caused difficulties, of course, for my father and for us as little children. And I have memories, but they're vague of that time frame. And
so when your mom died, it was you and then another brother, or what was the family situation?
Yeah. It was one of my brothers. His name's Travis. He was 3 at the time, so it was just us two, and my dad and mom when she passed. And
what'd your mom pass away from?
Well, she'd gone in for just a general hysterectomy at St. Joseph's in Lexington here, and apparently got the wrong anesthesia. I didn't know this till later on in life. I just assumed it was a serious illness. They gave her wrong anesthesia, and she went into a coma and never came out of it, passed away.
Wow. Well, man, that's obviously a really, really tough deal. The interesting part is Wayne Smith, who's a hero of mine, and obviously thousands of people here in Central Kentucky familiar with him, the founder of Southland Christian Church. He then played matchmaker for your dad, didn't he?
Yeah, he sure did. He introduced my father to a woman who was at the time in Tulsa, maybe Sapulpa, Oklahoma, who was married to a minister, and her husband was killed in a drunk driving accident. The drunk driver hit him, and he was killed on the scene. And so Wayne knew about that and my father's situation. I remember Wayne sitting with me at the hospital when my mom was in the coma. That's one of my memories. As he did for so many people, I'm sure. But he put them together. They got married like a year and a half later when I was 6. And she had, at the time, a little girl and a little boy who she was pregnant with when her husband was killed. So those are my stepbrother and stepsister. And then later on, they together had my half-brother, Nate, who was a missionary in New Zealand. You've had on your show before. So there's 5 of us kids. And soon after that, my dad took a ministry position in St. Louis, Missouri, and we moved there. And that's where I grew up and was raised all the way up through high school.
Well, you were a good athlete in high school, and I think basketball is your favorite sport. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was my favorite sport and the one I singled out and stuck with. And ended up, I was the only one of the 5 of us that went to a private school. My dad thought I think I was a freshman in high school at a public school, and after my freshman year, He could see some signs of my wildness maybe, and thought it'd be better situation for me to go to a private Christian school. So he sacrificed and did what he had to pay tuition for that. I don't know how he did it or how they did it, but they did and sent me there, and it was a great experience. And I played basketball there and did pretty well in school as well. So it was a blessing.
Well, that's good. So overall, your childhood, even though you did have a very traumatic event, obviously losing your mom at the age of 5, life went pretty good overall. You did well at the private school. You got the 2 blended families going on, and obviously you have you're very outgoing. You're an extrovert personality, so socially life is going pretty well too for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people look back on their younger days and feel like it was one of their favorite times of life. I certainly do. I don't know if that should be or supposed to be that way, but I had fun. Things went well. I had the cheerleader girlfriend, played basketball, and was good at it, and did well in school. Had a lot of friends. So yeah. It was a fun time, and I can't complain about. I had everything I needed growing up, and things were good, really.
Just tuned in. We're talking with Troy Hutchison, and Troy. This week, our theme is we're talking about hope through addiction, and Troy, as you may have heard, grew up in a pastor's home, and Jim Hutchison, but unfortunately his mother passed away at the age of 5, but he remarried after being set up by Wayne Smith, founding pastor of Southland Christian. So go to high school, you do well, you're a good enough basketball player that you were able to play basketball in college. Tell a little bit about that.
I did. It didn't last as long as I wished it would have. I got a partial basketball scholarship to what is now Cincinnati Christian University. Went there for my freshman year, and it went well most of my freshman year, but that is when I found that I enjoyed and loved to go out to clubs and kind of found my first experiences with drinking a lot and smoking marijuana as well. So those were the times where I really got outside of some of my father's teachings, what I'd grown up to know to be right, and kind of spread my wings, and kind of rebellion, I guess, kind of took over in my soul. Had that fire going in me.
All right. Well, obviously going to Cincinnati Christian University, the alcohol and marijuana are not a good mixture, and I would have to think that your academics had to start suffering too.
It did. It suffered so badly that I can remember at the end of my freshman year, not even preparing for any of my final exams, and not only didn't I prepare for them, I remember specifically going to some parties the night before several of my exams, and I didn't even go, and as it turns out, I didn't even attend any of them. So I ended my freshman year on a down note, failing all of my exams because I didn't even show up to class. So the next year, as I went into my sophomore year, my basketball coaches and some of my buddies who were also players had been in the same position as I was. I kind of relinquished all responsibility and got an I don't care attitude, and I just, at that point, I don't know what happened, but I just wanted to have fun, and I found that in alcohol and parties and clubs.
And also, you like the ladies a lot too, I believe.
I did like the ladies a lot, and that was part of it too. Just being able to be out, as a teenager and not having parents around and doing what I wanted to do. I actually did get the school itself kind of was a parent because I had a curfew. Most colleges don't have those, but at that time we did, and I didn't adhere to that at all. And so going into my sophomore year, I was on probation, and about halfway through my sophomore year, I dropped out and was kind of forced out at that point because of my grades and my behavior. So I like the girls, I like the alcohol, I like the clubs, and as a result of that, my education suffered.
All right. So an interesting story that you shared with me. A lot of people, parents, do the best they can, pastors and elders, the leaders in the church, and yet one night you shared with me that you found yourself at a party or living with some guys that all of them had really good foundations as far as growing up in Christian homes. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. After I left the college, it just so happened that a majority of my buddies had also been enrolled and been students there as well, had dropped out or had left or was asked to leave for the same reasons. And we found ourselves just renting an apartment a couple of blocks over from the college campus, actually. We're at different times between 4 and 7 or 8 of us living there. And that's when my drinking really took off to the point where it was daily. It was daily and heavy. And the guys, almost all of them that I lived with, had grown up in the church. Most of them were either elders or preachers' children, had great upbringings and backgrounds, and still had good relationships with their parents, as I did too, or wanted to. But we just kind of got that freedom, and rebellion took over, and we thought we were having fun, and it was fun to an extent. Didn't really have any responsibilities. I worked part-time. Most of us worked, or at least worked part-time. I delivered La Rosa's Pizza and worked at Chick-fil-A for a time at several of the spots around Cincinnati. So, but the majority of the time we spent was drunkenness and smoking marijuana at the time was the drug we were doing, and just going to clubs and a lot of sexual immorality, I guess you would say at that time. And just, it didn't matter if I knew them or not. It was one of those things out of control, man.
All right. Well, then you met a special young lady and dated her for 5 years, and in fact got engaged, but eventually the drinking problem took its toll on that relationship, didn't it?
It did. At first, she was a great girl. Won't name her here, but she stood by me for 5 years through that, and she at first was okay with it. She was herself, grew up in the church, and kind of went through her wild stage too. So the first year or two, it was fun. We had fun together doing those kind of activities, but as it wore on, it became obvious that it wasn't just fun for me or something, going out or just social. It was becoming a problem, and her repeated attempts to try to help me and to warn me that she couldn't live like that went unheard. I just continued to do what I wanted and found it hard to stop at that point. Towards the end of that 5-year relationship, I realized I've got a problem here. I'm not sure I could live without drinking or altering my mindset, so that was a turning point for me.
All right, well, if you just tuned in, we're talking with Troy Hutchison, and Troy grew up in a home that was God-centered. His dad was a pastor. In fact, I wound up attending church where he was a senior pastor at Bedford Acres about 20 years ago, and I lived up in Cynthiana, Kentucky, an outstanding communicator, outstanding man. But Troy, like a lot of young people, decided when he went off to college, explored partying, and unfortunately he wound up with an alcohol addiction, cost him an engagement to a young lady that he really loved in his mid-20s. But we're out of time today, so I hope you'll tune in tomorrow as we'll continue our conversation with Troy Hutchison about addiction and trying to find hope through that. I'm Greg Horn. We'll see you tomorrow on Hope is Here.
CMI is your full-service human resources provider in Central Kentucky. For 15 years, CMI Human Resources has taken great pride in helping organizations and people work. Whether it's employee handbooks or help in filling a position, no job is too large or too small for CMI. Contact the professionals today at CMI Human Resources, 859-296-2800, or online at cmiconsulting.com.